I am Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. Being a law enforcement officer takes a toll, physically and mentally. After over 20 years in law enforcement, Vinnie Montez is finding a new passion and success in comedy. This week, he sits down with me for a candid interview into how comedy saved his life and how he is using his newfound fame and success to bring awareness to the human side of the brave men and women who serve our communities as law enforcement officers. I'm Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. I'm here with Vinnie Montez, comedian, police officer. How the hell are we going to mix these two together?
Oh, man, I'm ready to go. Whatever. Let's just get into this, man. Let's not waste any time.
Dude, how do we take a police officer and make shit funny with the way things are going right now?
I tell you what, cops are like the funniest people in the world. People don't normally think that they're funny because nobody calls them when they're, having a good time and partying. Everybody be like, tss, tss, tss. Nobody calls them during those situations when everything's going good. It's when the melee happens at the end and somebody starts throwing drinks or something like that. We come in and now, we're dealing with the crap that's going on, right? So I wish we'd get invited at the beginning of the party so at least we can hang out, have a couple, maybe sandwiches, an ice cold glass of, Diet Coke. That kind of thing is what we want to do.
It's a true story. I got a lot of friends of mine, and they're like, man, will you stop texting me at 2 a.m. being like, hey, where's everybody at? When I tell them I need a ride home, I think it's safer than Uber. Do you have friends that do that?
Well, actually on duty is like you'll be driving down the road and people will be like waving you down. Hey, look, I can't get my Uber to come. Can you give us a ride home? We're only like a mile and a half that way. And I'm like, no. We're not Uber. You know what I mean? If you want to go to detox, we'll give you a ride, but we're not going to take you to your house. I mean, they're like, what about protect and serve? I'm like, yeah, come on, bro. Come on. We wouldn't be able to get anything done tonight if we were just being Uber, because then we pick somebody up, right? And then they call their friend. Oh my God, the officers just called us and they just said, hey, come on over. You can be your Uber tonight. And I've given people a ride home every now and then, but they'd be texting and then people be showing up, getting video of us dropping them off. Then somebody would jump in the back of the car being like, is this one of those Ubers where you can kind of share a ride? And I'd be like, oh my God. Next thing you know, we're 2 hours into the evening and we haven't done anything. We haven't responded to a single call. You know what I mean?
I want to get serious here for just a second. Why did you leave supermodeling to be a cop?
Why did I leave supermodeling to be a cop? I mean, isn't it evident? I know it's hard for you to wake up in the morning, but like when you're good looking like I am right now, it's hard to walk down the road. I mean, like people hit on me like you wouldn't believe. The girls especially hit on me on a Friday or Saturday night after the clubs, That's the only time, I'll be honest, that I get hit on. I call them the so-um girl. They're in the back of the cop car and like, are you single? And I'm like, come on! Nobody ever hits on me when I'm like, when they're sober. But the so-um girl.
So, Vinny, how do you transition from a police officer to a comedian? How'd that take place?
It was unintentional, honestly. Flat out, I had a bad experience in the field. My mental health was really tanking, and I wanted to do something that was not being a cop. I'd been told very long ago that you need to balance your life as a cop and non-cop outside of work, and I didn't listen. I'll be frank, I didn't listen. So once I hit the wall basically, and I was like, man, I need to do something different. I always thought about comedy early 2007, but I got serious in 2008 once this incident happened, and I jumped into it full force, just like I didn't do anything else. And initially, I was like, I remember like. Doing my first 2 minutes at Comedy Works downtown, and I was so nervous. And I still have that recording. I listened back to it, and I was like, "Wow, you suck." And I just couldn't believe it. And everything has blossomed since then. But comedy was really my outlet to share some of the darkness that I have inside of me and put it in a positive way, and just have an outlet so you weren't being cop all the time.
Was that Humanizing The Badge? Is that where that came from?
No. I actually didn't get involved with Humanize The Badge until like 2018, late 2017. That was completely separate. That comedy led to opening a door to go into that with Humanizing The Badge. So it's been a blessing. Yeah, 100%.
So is comedy basically your way of releasing some of that tension that builds up from being an officer over time?
Absolutely. Some people, they like to go fishing, they like to go camping, all those kind of things. I mean, I like that, but camping for me is like going to Holiday Inn Express. I'm not one for roughing it. But yeah, it's my outlet. It's my way of taking my pressure, my stress, and just letting it go.
Yeah, and obviously I've watched a lot of your stuff, man. There are some really funny bits about it. Do you see that as the whole entire next phase of life?
Absolutely. Until COVID hit, it really did a damage to me in that, like, I know it's affecting everybody, but comedy for me was like really on a roll. The day before I actually stopped and canceled everything that I got going for the summer, I was supposed to be in San Diego, California on the 14th of March doing a show for the San Diego County Sheriff's Office. This was a very big show, and we had just done a sold-out tour with Trailer Trash Tammy, Texas Takeover in Texas in January. It was awesome. And then here we go, COVID, and it's like everything shuts down. I'm blessed, though, to still have a job because I'm still a cop. Thank God I didn't quit this career and be like, hey, because I'd be like, can I come back? And then I'd be like working on probably the street again.
What happens with, obviously, comedians just feed so much off of the crowd that, in a place.
Yeah.
So have you done anything outside of any virtual type of comedy, any of that?
I've done one show, and they actually brought me in. They had 10 people present, spaced 6 feet apart, and then they gave me a mic that was tied to a computer, and they had literally there was 30 separate screens that I could see on this computer. I'm sure there were more, and I did this show virtually, but with at least 10 people live. Had I not had those 10 people in the room, it would have been terrible because I just need something to feed off of.
Right.
What's the cadence? Just like cop work, there's a cadence to doing it, especially when you're in the field and dealing with people. Well, comedy's the same way. I have to feel the room, what's going on. And so when I had those people, it was just amazing.
How much of your material comes from being a cop?
I would say 80%, 70, 80% comes from it. Not always do I talk about, the context of what the cop is, but I talk about, the things that happen. There's, in law enforcement, there's anger, happiness, sorrow, all the things that major comics talk about. And I'll find a way to kind of tie that in. And even some of the subjects where people are like, you're going to talk about being a marijuana and you're a cop. And I'm like, yeah, it's the reality of what we deal with. And everywhere I go around the country, people are like, dude, they have legal marijuana. Cops are fascinated by this wherever you go if they don't have legal marijuana. Because in Texas, they're like, you got marijuana, boy? It's like, they'll lock you up, Here, we're like, people will come up to our cars and they'll be like, excuse me, officer. And you're like, yes. And you think they're about to report a crime of the century, and they're like, look, there's a guy down there by the creek. He is smoking the marijuana. And you're like, okay. And
do people in Boulder hold signs that say, not homeless, not hungry, just want weed?
Yeah. And I know. It's very prevalent to us. And as a culture where I worked in narcotics for 2 tours, and my first tour, we were busting down doors and taking, hundreds of marijuana plants. And I got to tell you, after spending years doing that, I feel like it was all for nothing because I feel bad. People don't even get in trouble for that anymore. No. And, it's society's choice. I'm not here to make the law. I'm just here to enforce it. And that's no longer an issue for our society in Colorado. But yeah, cops are always amazed. They're like, oh my God, do you stop? I'm like, dude, you better have a carload full of marijuana. You better have 13 juveniles in that car for us to and I'm not saying it's not a big deal, but we have bigger things to deal with at this point in time. And Colorado's made it clear that.
Have you ever got back to the PD and had a contact high?
Well, I wrote a bit called 420 Tickle Me Elmo, and I talk about working a 420 event. It's actually an event that I worked at the college. 10,000 people and just tons of people. And I didn't know how to explain to people how nervous I was working that event. I was like, dude, there's no way that we're not breathing this in. And because we're just in a cloud of smoke, right? And so I end up saying, I wrote this bit called Tickle Me Elmo, and it basically says, I was standing there and I was like, man, I wonder if I get a contact high. And then how do I change that to make that funny? I was like, if I get a contact high, I become Mexican Tickle Me Elmo. More importantly, I didn't realize is if I get a contact high, I become Mexican Tickle Me Elmo. And when I did that line, it took forever to figure out the sequence. But once I got it, people were like, oh my God. And then I do the act out, and I'm like, and I put the Mexican twist to it, and everybody's like, oh my God, that's hilarious. And the cool thing about it, though, is people say, well, do you ever use your comedy? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely I do. I don't go on calls anymore because where I work, I'm a commander, as much as I used to. But when I go on calls, I'm always trying to break down that barrier where I like to make people laugh. And you'll get some of the hardest core dudes are like, I ain't gonna just cop, man. And because, they have their experience of whatever it is, and everybody's got the cop story. No matter who they are in the United States, they have the one cop story that they've had in their lifetime, and that's always what comes out, right? This cop did this cop did that. Oh my God, my friend Sally told me that the cops were just like that, whatever it is. And so my goal is when I'm out there and I have a chance to interact with people is like, can I make you laugh? Can I make you realize that it's a human being underneath the badge, the gun, and all that stuff? Because that's what it is. And that's what it really translates into 2020 with everything going on around the country right now.
Oh, man, yeah. We're going to hit on that because I do have a little segment at the back end of this that I want to talk about when we get a little bit serious about it. But that was certainly a question I wanted to ask you is, do you try and bring humor to every time that there was a stop? I mean, being a commander now, you may not have as much interaction with people, but when you were, did you try and use comedy to diffuse the situations?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one specific example. I was in Louisville one time, and I was helping their agency out, and they were breaking up this party, and the people were coming out of the house because they were having them all sit down and stuff like that. And this guy came out, and he was like mean mugging me. I'm like, hey, how you doing? I'm just being nice. But they don't want to have nothing to do with me. And here comes this lady out of the house, and she's walking down the staircase, and she's like looking at me, but she's not looking at me mean. She's looking at me like she's trying to figure out who I am. And she's like, hey, man, are you that cop that I watched the other night at Comedy Works? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, oh my God, this guy's totally legitimate. He's so funny. He's a good dude. So now everybody wants to hate on me, but they can't because one of their own people in their group is like, dude, this guy's valid, dude. He's totally good.
I totally wondered that. Like,
Yeah.
have you ever stopped somebody that they had seen Vinnie Montez on stage?
Yeah, it's happening more now than it ever has, but like that was a long time ago. I hadn't been doing it very long, and this one person happened to see it. But what I thought was so cool about it is that all it takes is one person to see the humanity of who you are. And just because I was funny, like she didn't know me from Adam. Truly, we hadn't sat down and be like, how are you? I'm Vinnie Montez. And she's like, hey, I'm Ann Smith, whatever her name is. We never had that. All we had is I made her laugh while I was on stage.
Right.
So because I showed that humorous side and I wasn't just the cop to her, all of a sudden she was validating me amongst her friends. And I'm like, the whole mood of the entire contact changed. And I mean, that makes me proud. That's like a very powerful moment. People just want to be able to trust the officers that they're dealing with. And they want to know that they're not going to get hurt and they're not going to be given an unfair shake. They want to be treated with the impartiality that I think everybody expects to be treated. And when you have somebody that you have trust, it's like anything in law enforcement that we deal with. I was a negotiator for a year before they kicked me off the team when I got promoted. And it was cool, but I loved being
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
A comedian negotiator.
Well, I was. So I got trained by the FBI to be a negotiator for our SWAT team, and it was amazing. It was something I really enjoyed because you're talking with people, and it's your ability in order to break down the barrier to establish that communication.
Right.
And I was so excited to be part of this team, and I was for a year, got all trained up, ready to go, and then I get promoted, and because I'm a commander, they boot me off the team. But, I mean, I get it. We can only have so many people on the team that are commanders, but you totally made me forget what I was going with this.
Well, the only thing I'm thinking of is, you know what? I mean, comedy is across the board.
Yeah.
Everybody loves to
but
laugh.
here's what it is. Let me go back to this real quick. Comedy is the same thing as being a negotiator, and I didn't draw this until we were just talking about it, but it's a very valid point. So as a comedian, you're trying to constantly establish a rapport with the audience, so they want to hear what you have to say, but you have to be likable in order for them to want to listen.
Right.
And when they really like, if you see Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock or George Lopez or any of these guys, before they even walk out now onto stage, the entire room is already on their side because they know what they're coming to see. They know the comedian they're coming to see, and they're excited. So, like, even if George Lopez or one of those guys, like, kind of bombs a little bit at the beginning, they're like, ah! Because they're already on the team, right?
Man, I know. We tried to get all of them.
Right. Well, I don't know. One day, hopefully. But my point about being a negotiator is the same thing. You're even working harder to establish that trust with the person on the other side of the line in order to get them to understand that you're going to give them a fair shake. And it's not about being liked, but it's about being trusted. And so I felt there was a very strong nexus between me learning to be a negotiator and being a comedian. It's because when I'm out there on stage, I'm working nonstop to keep the audience on my side. And I'll tell you what, I've had moments like at Squire's Lounge. I grew up on going to the open mics on Colfax, Squire's Lounge, and you're up there and you're doing like 2 or 3 minutes and nobody's listening to you. People are yelling at you. They're telling you to get off the stage. You suck. All this stuff, Denver PD's coming in, arresting people during the middle of your set. And anybody who grew up in my time at Squire's Lounge, the Troy Walkers, the Elliot Woolseys, any of these people who've morphed into really good comedians, they'll tell you the same thing. But you know what? I had to cut my teeth in order to learn that dynamic of how to read a room, how to understand it. And all those skills of being a cop has really helped me read that room and move into that area.
Well, I can also see that wickedly beneficial in dealing with somebody when you've got an issue, man.
Sure.
I mean, it just has to be.
Yeah.
Nobody there. The thing about comedy is there's nobody when you're in comedy, especially as a fan or a spectator, man, you're just wanting to be entertained, and it's always a light, easy, fun mood, right? It's just the whole system is set up for that. And I can only see that, having that wittiness, reading those people all the time has to be beneficial when you're out there on the job.
100%. I think cops, like a lot of people don't understand this, but cops, if truly you sat down and were in the briefing rooms with cops when there was no citizens around, were just being themselves, joking around. Cops are some of the most witty. They can think on their feet. They are funny and humorous, but they don't do that out in the public because they don't want to be, judged about what they're saying. But there's that dark humor, and I've alluded to it. Like I'll tell it right now because there's a joke that I have. It's based in very much reality, but I could never do this on a stage where there's just a general public audience. I did it in an open mic once, and they were like, yeah, you can leave now. And the joke is simply this, but I do it for a law enforcement audience because it's dark and they've all been there, they get it. And it's this. I was like, we had this guy that he just couldn't take it anymore. He sat in the passenger side of his car. He took a double-barrel shotgun, put it to his chin, and pulled the trigger. So there was nothing left from here up. Audience is completely quiet at this point. They're like, okay, where are you going with this? So one of the detectives gets there. One of the first things we got to do is identify the guy who's passed away. So he's rooting through his belongings and finds his wallet, pulls out his wallet, finds his driver's license, takes it out, puts his thumb over the guy's head on the license, is like, do you think this is our guy right here? Now, cops are losing their mind, right? Like, I've done that in cop audiences. They're like, oh, my God. And it's not that we're making fun of the situation.
No, I get it.
It's the dark humor that we have to use when we're trying to survive those incidents in order to be able to do that for a long period of time.
Absolutely.
But you tell that to the average citizen, and they're like, oh, my God. And they're freaking out. People are losing their mind like, you insensitive son of a bitch. And it has nothing to do with that.
Tell me, has the crowd changed?
Today?
Yeah.
A little bit. Like a lot of major comedians, Jerry Seinfeld and all the A-list comedians, they don't like doing colleges anymore, from what I hear. Some of the things I've read, because there is a lot of sensitivity. And for me, that's hard because I'm like, man, comedy in its truest, pure form is you got to be able to go there,
Yeah.
And a lot of the kids, bless their hearts, because they're much more sensitive to everything political issues today. But comedy's comedy, and if you, like, for example, Bob Saget, everybody thinks that he is like the cleanest guy in the world because he did Full House.
God,
and then you go watch him come to a show, and I've seen him at like Comedy Works in Denver, and people are like leaving. They're like, that is not the Bob Saget from Full House. Right? And you're like, yeah, that's why they tell you on the ticket, this is for adult entertainment, you know what I mean? And he's a great comedian, but it's the essence of what you can be. I am not a dirty comedian. I'll be very honest with you.
No, it's true. You're clean.
I'm very clean because I want to get my message out, and I want to I want to have a broad appeal. But if you get me in a situation where I'm doing a corporate show for like first responders only, I'm going to go there with the dark humor, and they're going to get it because they can all relate to being in that situation that I'm talking about.
Right. No, it's true. I absolutely love comedy. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's a stress reliever for me. But I like the real truth. I like that. There's always truth in everything, right? And so I like the people that go down that road, One of the things is you talk about the millennials are coming in.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a great bit for
By
me.
the way, they're all correcting me. They're like, look, it's not the millennials. It's the generation after. And they're like getting all technical. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But the word millennial, everybody understands what I'm trying to say. So to all you millennials listening right now, don't be so literal, okay? Understand the context of which I'm trying to communicate the situation, all right?
What?
Quit being so goddamn sensitive all the time. I love you, you granola eating, non-gluten eating sons of bitches. I love you, but just let me tell my comedy without you trolling me on the internet. Do you
Dude,
know?
I about passed out when you went into the Subaru crew.
Oh, I love talking shit about Subaru drivers. I love them. I love the Subaru drivers. Here's why. They're like the most law-abiding citizens in the world. They drive at 10 and 2. They're so compassionate. They've got their Birkenstocks in the glove box. They've got their their dogs in the back compartment. They have a little bowl with every dog's name on it. They're just wonderful people, right? But you sons of bitches are always blocking the fast lane when I'm trying to go down the highway, okay? That's what I'm telling you.
Have you ever seen a Subaru without a bumper sticker?
No, the coexist one especially.
I've never seen a Subaru without a bumper sticker.
I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, so that's my hometown. And, the Subaru driver, I think, is the local. I mean, they basically, if they stop buying Subarus in Boulder, Colorado, like Subaru probably go out of business because they buy so many of them. And people are so proud of it. This is my first Subaru, and it's been with me. It's got 300,000 miles. When I was in college, I bought this one. Well, actually, my mom gave it to me because we had a trust fund. And so then, everything was fine. And then the next thing, I got this one. I'm like, oh, my God. But they're proud of it. Good for them. I love it. My brother brought a Subaru, so I disowned his ass.
26 miles surrounded by reality, right?
Yeah.
That's Boulder?
It is. I didn't understand what it really was to be in Boulder until I started traveling a lot, which I was lucky to do from a very young age. But you go outside of Boulder, and the rest of the country is not like Boulder. I mean, you're like, wow.
You mean you can walk down the street and not have street performers?
That's right. That's true. That's true. Boulder's pretty funny, though. Like, people are coming. They're like, there's some guy that put himself in, like, a 2x2 box. And I was like, oh, you were down on Pearl Street. There's some guy eating fire down there. And I'm like, yeah, you're on Pearl Street. If you haven't... United States of America, my fellow brethren, if you haven't been to Colorado, you got to go to Boulder because it'll be an experience. You'll see people like stuffing themselves in boxes.
True story, man.
But it's a good time. Like if you go to Boulder, everybody's very open. They're very accepting. There's a lot of tolerance, which makes me proud to be part of Boulder, Colorado. I mean, I joke about it, but I really love being from Boulder, Colorado.
I spent a lot of time there. It's neat.
It's a neat place.
Trails, people are just easy, laid back.
Terrible Mexican food.
Terrible Mexican food. They're all high. Everybody's happy.
Hey, I am not high. I did not have marijuana while I was working.
I never inhaled there ever.
I'll tell you so. Let's get down with this. When I took my polygraph to become a cop, this is not even a joke. This is serious. I went to take my polygraph, and like when you take your polygraph, they have like 50 questions. Have you done marijuana? Have you done LSD? Have you done cocaine? They list all the drugs, and I'm like, no. I take my polygraph. The polygraph is over, and now the examiner comes back into the room, and he's like, Mr. Montez, I'm a little concerned about something. I'm seeing a little deceit potentially here in your marijuana question. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, have you ever really used marijuana? I'm like, your machine must be fucking broken. I literally told him that. And I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh my God, they think I was using marijuana. I have never did a single drug growing up, nothing. And now I'm in there and like I answer the question. He's like, and he doesn't even give any follow-up. He's like, thank you very much for coming, shoves me out the door. And I freak out. So I go flying back to Colorado. I drive back to Boulder. And because this was downtown Denver somewhere.
How's it feel to be on the other side,
yeah.
by the way?
And I had to, well, exactly. And so I go back to Boulder. I go up to the lieutenant who was my advisor for my whole career while I was an explorer. And I tell him, I'm like, hey, Phil, they were asking me the marijuana question. And they were like, they saw some deceit. I'm like, Phil, I never used. I didn't do anything. Phil, what's going on? He's like, calm down. They got to pick something to see if there's a change in you. And I'm like, oh. And of course I passed and everything, but I was literally shitting bricks for like a week until they finally got the results because I'm like, I didn't do anything. And I wanted to tell the guy, I want to be like, I didn't do anything. Can we do it again? And he's
Did he
like,
look you in the eye and go, Maury has proved that that's a lie?
He just wanted to shove me out the door, and I was like, I want to be heard.
So in the whole comedy and obviously COVID jacking with that and so on and so forth, Where are you going with it? I mean, is it something that
Well, I'm going right down the shitter at this point in time because we can't get a show to save our life right now. Well, here's the truth. We were supposed to. So there's a lot of people I'm working with in the comedy world right now. Libby Higgins, Officer Daniels, myself, Trailer Trash Tammy. She also goes by Chelsea Lynn. We had those 4 sold-out shows in January in Texas, and we were about to start another tour in April, right after COVID started. We had sold-out shows in Tennessee, Nashville, Huntsville, Alabama, Raleigh, North Carolina, Virginia Beach, and all that got flushed right down the toilet. And so a lot of those shows have been pushed back to September, but I'm not really confident that that's even going to happen. You know, the spikes are happening right now around the country. And that's okay with me. I would rather us be safe about it. You know, I'm at risk. I'm a big guy. I heard it's not good to be a big guy and have COVID. You know, I'm a big guy, and I've got asthma issues too. So I want to be able to breathe. And you know, I'm not. And I also want to say I'm not making light of everything going on in the country. I truly have had asthma issues my whole life, and so I just want to be able to make it through COVID. I'm super paranoid. You know, like we have like this assembly line system when groceries arrive at the house, you know, even though they're like, oh, that's not a big deal anymore. Like we're wiping stuff down. There's an area that's like a containment zone before it can come out of that zone and move into the actual normal part of the house.
Well, I'm 6 feet 6 inches from you because that was what we had decided.
I know. I told them, I said, I'm not playing. If I'm coming to do this, we are maintaining social distancing. So, Governor, I just want you to know that Vinnie Montez is in compliance.
And I am 100% sure that it does not go any further than 6 foot 6 inches in the air. I'm convinced. 100%.
What is wrong with you?
And it can't.
Did
go
you take
laterally.
your medicine before you came for this interview today?
No. As a matter of fact,
Is that a blue pill reference?
it could be.
Are you taking them like Skittles? Don't lie to me.
Dude, I'm telling you, I just don't know about this stuff yet. I'm just telling you, but I respect it.
Yeah.
And I'm 6 foot 6 inches from you.
Yeah, well, I just want you to know that I appreciate it. Every part of my Latino-ness appreciates it.
Right. Tell me about that.
Well, I'll tell you what. I grew up in Boulder where, like I said, I've never felt a lot of racism or anything like that where I work or live. I'm very fortunate for that. A lot of my friends, especially in the comedy world, you know, I was just talking with my buddy last night. He is a longtime friend, started with me in comedy. And, you know, he was telling me stories back in the day when he was living in Denver, some of the things that happened to his family members and in Denver and things like that. And, you know, it's hard for me to hear those things because it's just like, wow, man, that's crazy. And I have no reason not to believe them. And we see things, you know, every single cop that's here in the agency that I work with, and I'm sure across the country, we all know that there's bad cops. I would also suspect that I could say, speaking for those cops, that we don't want them in this line of profession, because every time something happens, we're all like, oh, man, now we're going to have to take this, you know, it's going to be hard for a while again, you know, and it's like we think we get rid of one situation after it gets dealt with and the officers get charged. It's just an ongoing cycle, but the officers who are doing good, and that's what I've been talking about lately. I wrote that bit that just came out, You Don't Know Me. It went viral on Facebook. I had to write it because I just had to speak up for the officers who are doing well. And I know, and doing the right thing every day coming to work.
I saw that, man, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And you know what? That's the beauty of when I got to know we got to do your podcast, man, I was so super excited about it because, God, I don't think there's anything that we need more than a cop/comedian.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is the perfect person that we need right now because everybody, I mean, good Lord, it's the craziest thing.
There's a lot of stuff coming out. I've spent a lot of time writing while we've been locked up in COVID.
Right? Quinceañera. I don't get it.
Dude, white people, listen, dude, you cannot say, you all say different, like quinceañera. Like
it's quinceañera, right?
Quinceañera.
That's what I said.
No, not you said quinceañera.
Yeah, close enough.
Okay.
That's as good as I can do. So you got to do a skit
You
on
got to roll the R's, bro.
Okay. Well, how about this? Here, I'll roll the R's. $15,000 for a quinceañera. I'm like, wait a what? That's a car. I'm not doing a party. I'm buying her a car.
I know, but that's a big deal in a young Mexican lady's life, man. That's
Well, not in my young Mexican lady's life. She's getting
What
a
are you
big deal
talking
car.
about? What do they call that in the white culture? The Sweet 16 or whatever?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I've seen more than 15 grand getting spent on. You watch those Sweet 16 shows? They're spending like $150K.
No.
You know, they're rolling up in Maseratis. Daddy, what do you mean I can't have gold flake?
That's a whole different level.
I can't have a gold leaf cake. I can't have a gold leaf cake.
I do enjoy watching that.
Brittany down the street has a gold leaf cake, Daddy. I want a gold leaf cake.
That's not happening in my house.
And the Mexicans were like, hey, vato, as long as they bring plenty of bolai y cerveza más fina, you know, modelo, we're good to go, eh? Look, get refugio out back, get the tub, the horse trough, y se puts in ice. And when it's filling ice, put the water hose, la manguera, cabrón. And then fill it up.
I loved that experience. I mean, you should do a whole entire skit on just my experience as it coming into this culture. I never knew people cooked that damn much.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we do. I don't.
Unbelievable.
I just eat. Obviously, as you can see, I just eat. I show up when it's done. But you can't go to your aunt's house like it's in the Mexican culture. Like even with the lady that I'm dating now, like one of the weirdest things in the world. Like I could show up at my mom's house. I kid you not. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. Mom, I'm here. Oh, mijo, it's so good to see you. Come in. All your friends. Oh, bring them in. Are you guys hungry? And she'll just start cooking a feast right then and there, dude. My lady now, like, I'm like, hey, we're in the neighborhood of her parents. We're like, let's stop by and see them. And she's like, oh, no, we haven't called. We need to set up a time. I'm like, what are you talking about? Any Mexican, you ask them if they want to be, like, dropping by their parents' house. They don't care. Nobody cares.
For real, man. Actually, one of the things that's really interesting when I met my wife now, I love the Hispanic culture when it comes to family, right? And that's always been important to me. And so I actually love that closeness of a ton of people, right? But it was a cultural shock and a whole lot of things, and I think it's just funnier than shit. And I like it.
Yeah, you notice your voice right now is you're like almost getting Latino as you're speaking. You're like when people are around.
When people are around.
When I go to New Mexico and Albuquerque with my family, I come back. I'm like, I sound different. I'm like, we were over at the house the other day. And my tío came over and he was like, you guys want to go eat? And I shit you not. I come back from being with my family in New Mexico. I'm like, hey, we were going to go get the car, but the damn dog came out and bit your brother on the leg.
Well, that does change. And I'm not kidding. When I go back to Missouri, I come back and sound like a hillbilly. They don't realize that most people do know the curse words.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I know what pendejo meant. Or however you want to say it, and probably roll the J or however.
That's okay.
You guys do
That's all right. We're going to let you just be a fool. Go for it. You're entertaining me at this point. Go ahead. Say the next one.
But we're
Tu eres un pinche.
I loved it.
We're editing this out for sure.
But it is. I think that comedy has to go there. And I feel like if you don't go there, we lose something magnificent.
Yeah, and I think that you got to be able to be who you are. Like, I'll be honest with you. Right now, I'm extreme. Inside, I mean, you guys are like, I want to cut loose here. I want to say some things. I hope people aren't judging. You know, we're joking around. We're having a good time. There is some sincerity in here in the underlying meaning of, the overall things that we're talking about. But cops are constantly on edge today where they don't feel like they can just be themselves because they're going to, if they joke about something, is it going to be taken out of context?
Yeah.
And that's why you don't hear me talking about what agency I actually work for right now is because I have to be a different person in some ways when I'm representing the brand of the agency I work for.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean in a professional sense, which there's a lot to be said about being the professional decorum and what needs to happen. But man, you know what? Get to the humanity. That's why I am part of Humanize the Badge. We're trying to get people to understand that these cops are funny, man. I'm telling you, they may not seem funny when they're writing you a ticket, or yelling you, hey, get over here. They're not funny when they're doing that, right? But they're great people and they're such humorists and one of the things that cops are not known for, but people don't realize it. They're some of the greatest actors that you will ever see in your entire life because they constantly are adapting and evolving to the situation. Like, and you're like, well, what are you talking about? You ask any cop in this country, you ever been there where the guy that's standing in front of you, they're going to jail because they got a warrant, and they know they got a warrant, and this little dialogue will happen between the guy with the warrant and the cop. Hey, man, so you taking me to jail? And the cops be like, hey, you know what, man? We're waiting to see once they confirm things, but let's not put the cart before the horse. Let's just wait and see what happens. All that cop is doing is stalling for time until his backup can get there. Well, no, tell me, man, seriously. Be like, you know what? I don't want to tell you something I don't know the answer to truly at this point in time. We know what's going to happen, but we're trying to buy time. And every cop right now that's listening to this, or was a former cop, they all know that this happens. But we're trying to just, we're acting, or like somebody asks you, let's get dark here for a second. Are they dead? Can you just tell me? And sometimes that's not our role to say that.
Yeah.
And so you're like, you know what? We're waiting from the official word, and sometimes, you don't want to tell, the kid, we're taking your dad to jail. We want to be respectful, take him outside the house, cuff him up outside, so the kid doesn't at least see their parent getting cuffed up by a cop and taken away. And we don't want to tell that kid, that at that point in time. And so there's so many acting roles that go on, so many comedic roles that go on where cops are just trying to be human. But now in today's society, there's a lot of judgment that goes with it. You just can't be yourself.
It's so tough. Again, if you place everything kind of in context, again, you've got this really small barrier, and it's kind of one of the things that comes up today. But underneath that very small barrier of blue is a real person that's different than what he's got to, or he or she has to portray on the outside underneath that badge.
Right. One of the things I think that's really serious today is people want to, and I completely support this for the general public. Everybody wants to be judged on their merit of their own, of what they're doing, of who they are. Mitch, they want to be judged on, I'm Bob Smith. Judge me as Bob Smith of my merits, who I am. Don't judge me based upon the color of my skin, the content of, what I'm wearing, anything like that. Judge me based on who I am. Well, touche, I agree with that 100%. I want that to be that way, but guess what? It goes the other way too. Just because you see a uniform, a badge, and a gun doesn't mean that person is automatically a bad person.
Yeah, 100%.
And we have to be able to step past that and get to know them, and it's hard because part of the culture has to change on the law enforcement side too, is where we have always kind of trained cops to be like, professional, don't ever talk about your personal stuff. Well, you know what? I've kind of already foregone that whole thing. I've talked about my personal experiences when I'm dealing with people all the time. I may not give the names associated, the date, time, the date, time, and when exactly it occurred. But when you share your personal stories and show a little bit of vulnerability about who you are as a human, that's what makes connection with people. And so it's on us as leaders in this organization where I work, and also it's also upon the other leaders around the other agencies around the country to start looking at that and seeing it's okay to not be that stone wall. I'm not going to share anything personal. I'm not going to talk. And you see the officers today, and I get it. I know where they're coming from. The citizen will ask them, well, what's your name? And they'll be like, it's right here. It's, V Montez. And, well, what's the V? Well, you can call me, Deputy Montez or whatever. It's like, no, listen, man, if you want to break down that barrier, there's nothing wrong with telling somebody your first name. If they're going to want to find out who you are and get all your digits and all your information, they're going to get it.
Yeah.
So just break it down. So it's not only upon the citizenry to be open to hearing that, but we as law enforcement officers also have to adapt to the culture that we're in today and be a little bit more open to, breaking down that wall so we can actually move forward and not stay in the same place that we're at.
No, I get it, man. I do. And of course, God, just fun talking to you from the comedy side, because you are funny as hell. And there's so many great things about that. I don't want to lose the comedy in the PC culture, because I think that with everything that you say, there's always a piece of truth, right?
Yeah.
And same thing with True Talks and some of the other stuff I've done. When you get down and break it down to real life stories of people, I love the way that's called Humanizing the Badge. That's exactly what you do, is humanize, right? And so I hope that's never lost. I think you got to go into the cultures, you got to go into that stuff, make it funny, make it fun, and then people can just kind of relax with it. Let's go into a little bit of the darker side of it, though. I know COVID is important to you.
Yep.
You said you have asthma, so on and so forth. You watch these videos, and these people are right up in these cops' face.
Yeah.
I mean, man, I don't think I would be able to handle that. Matter of fact, I know I wouldn't.
No, and that's the hard part is I know there's a lot of anger, with what happened in Minneapolis. That was appalling, and nobody that I know in the law enforcement community condones that. That should have never happened. I've been in those situations where, you got somebody that's pinned down that you're fighting with, and once you get to a situation where you've got control, we have things that we're trained in order to put people in on their side. What that's called is positional asphyxiation, and that was terrible to see. What's also equally terrible to see is just people, like you said, standing in the line and having people get right up in their face, and it's not only tough on those first responders who are standing on that line and having to take the brunt of all the anger that people have been feeling that's pent up for not just watching that incident, but some of the other injustices that have occurred around the country. And what people don't realize is all those people that are standing on that front line have men and women who love them and support them at home, kids who are waiting for mom and dad to come home. And then there's another side to it now where what I worry about and why I spoke up and wrote the piece, You Don't Know Me, is one of the great things that makes this country so good with the law enforcement that we do have out there is the fact that we have a lot of tenured, experienced people. There are officers that are going to do wrong out there. And those guys, like I said in my piece, if you do something wrong and hurt somebody or cause somebody's death or use force when you shouldn't use it, you need to be treated just like anybody else would, and you need to be held accountable for it. But when we go so far to the extreme that we label all cops as being bad, or we try to say that we should go out there and kill cops, some of the things that you're seeing people say in the media, and I know it's a smaller majority than, or a smaller group of people than it is really a majority that are saying that kind of stuff, but when that's being publicized, that affects the mental health of law enforcement. And I could tell you right now, from dealing with all the things that I have dealt with, we didn't really touch on it very much, but one of the reasons I got into comedy was because of my poor mental health, and we briefly touched on that. Well, now you're seeing all this impact cops. Not only are they dealing with COVID on the front line trying not to get sick, but now they're dealing with the brunt of America. Not all of America, but there's a lot of it, and there's a lot of rhetoric in the media saying all cops are bad and all this stuff, and you know this cop did wrong and that cop did wrong, and then the Atlanta thing happened.
Yeah. Man,
and you know, a lot of cops felt like there wasn't a lot of due process there. Wow. And so now there is a possibility where we're going to start seeing cops, families really rooting the cop to not necessarily remain in the law enforcement profession.
Well, that's where I wanted to go with that because number one, when and feel free to touch on it. It was that kind of buildup, and you told me one other time you know what, you got to kind of maybe tip that bucket because you got to let some of that come out.
You got to let it come out, and the cops, you know, they're expected to stand on the line. I was even surprised by seeing some of the stuff in Minneapolis where you got the National Guards people who are completely, you know, apolitical and nothing to do with anything. They're just normal citizens who happen to serve in the Guard, and there's people that are chastising them. And I was like, man, what are we doing? And so what I worry about is what makes people great cops is the amount of experience that they're able to gain being in this profession. And people are like, well, what do you mean? Isn't just a cop being a cop? No, let me tell you what I mean. You don't take somebody that's in the NBA and grab them right out of junior high and throw them in the NBA. No, it takes time for them to build the skills and, you know, when they're really young, all the way up through high school. And some kids have the talent to go right from high school into the NBA. But there are countless hours, experiences, failures, learning how to do something correctly before they reach that level. And then when they're at that level, they're able to perform at a high level that nobody else is able to perform at. Well, it's the same thing for a cop. The great cops, the ones who really become great investigators, the ones who really become able to be strong negotiators, the people who are able to reach the public in a way that nobody else cannot happen overnight. You have to have officers have failures, make mistakes, not be able to, you know, succeed all the time, and they're going to screw up. Well, that's called being a tenured veteran and learning the hard way sometimes through the school of hard knocks. My concern is right now you have a lot of younger officers, and I know I joked earlier, the millennials, but even the younger generation, the newer generation, the millennial, what is it, Z generation?
Whatever they call
Whatever it is, they're coming in and they have less than 5 years of experience. Well, now they're getting influenced by their husbands, wives, kids saying, I don't want you to go do this job because of what they're seeing.
Yeah.
That is going to be detrimental to the society overall because we want people that are tenured in this business. You don't want people who are just brand new out of the academy all the time. And you need those people who are tenured to teach the new ones coming up, to share those experiences, to share, hey, that's not going to work well for you. And when you really want accountability, when people say we want cops to speak out, well, I'm going to tell you right now, those field training officers for the vernacular of what we do in our job, the FTOs, and those senior veterans that are out there, people don't think that they're speaking up and teaching these young officers, that's exactly what's happening. Those FTOs and those 10-year veterans, when younger officers are stepping out of line or doing something wrong, they're the ones typically saying, hey, come over here, youngster. This is not how we do it. This is how we do it. And if you don't have them around, and the younger generation coming up is just constantly a new generation coming out of academy, or you don't have people. Right now, we're already in a crisis where people don't want to do this job anymore. Before COVID or before Minneapolis happened, George Floyd happened, that was already an issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I'm saying is take the time to understand the dichotomy and the dynamic. I am not I'm not trying to not acknowledge or minimize any of the injustice that's occurred. No way. It is truly a bad thing that happened in Minneapolis.
I think a lot of people agree with that. I mean, I haven't met a single one that doesn't believe that, right? What do you think about this whole defund the police though?
Wow, I think that
I mean, what the hell you do with no police?
Well, one of my friends was sharing some stuff with me last night where basically there was a defund the police protest somewhere, and they showed up and they still wanted the cops to protect them.
Right.
And so I was like, how does that work? And so I think what the movement is, and I'm being kind of a smartass right there, but what I think the movement is saying, are we putting the right resources in law enforcement to the right things? And what I mean by that is, where I work, the leadership has done a really good job of getting cops prepared to deal with people that are having mental health issues. So all of our deputies, at least the goal is to have everybody trained for CIT, crisis intervention training. I'm even a coach for that. Mm-hmm. So I train people in this method in order to deal with people that have mental health issues. So that's a huge thing. A lot of officers in bigger agencies, there's only certain people that are trained to deal with those kinds of things. We have turned law enforcement into being the catch-all for everything that's going on. So like your neighbor's noise is way too loud and they don't turn their stuff down. Instead of getting the management company or them going over there knocking on the door saying, hey, can you please turn your music down? Call the cops.
Yeah.
My clock on my refrigerator is not set for the right time. Call 911. Hey, what time is it? You know.
Right.
There's a person that's in crisis mental health-wise. Call the cop. And you have people showing up in uniform who it can be interpreted as soon as they see a cop, there's going to be a response, oh my gosh, right? So I think that some of the people that are talking about defund the police is maybe a more appropriate way to say it is reallocate some of the resources that are being dispersed in the law enforcement profession, disperse those to more specific places where it might be of more service to the actual public, where a police presence is not needed.
I love that you said that and stated exactly that way, because even I've got some buddies that are like talking about defund the police. And again, you know what's so frustrating in a bunch of this type of stuff is a term comes out and then everybody draws this whole big conclusion to everything, because I think you're exactly right. If police are responding to this certain mental health issue, it might be better if somebody with mental health goes there first. Of course, I can see problems with that too on the other way.
I can too, because things from my experience, those situations can escalate very quickly. Yeah. But there's a show, if you guys have a chance to see it on HBO, called Crisis Cops, and actually the two guys that are involved in that have recently reached out to me. They're in San Antonio, Texas, and they have a plainclothes crisis intervention team unit, CIT unit, and they have a different approach of how they're dealing with some of the mental health issues. If you haven't had a chance to see, you got to check it out. It's amazing.
I haven't, but I will.
But yeah, I think that there's a lot of things that we have to do, and the cops on one side also have to be open to the fact that we don't police like we did, even 20 years ago when I first got into this business. We police a lot differently where I work. Things are going to change in evolution. And one things that cops don't like, which citizens you should know, is cops don't like change, because they're very used to their, regiment and how they do things, because that's part of what we do. We have specific guidelines and policies that tell us how to, operate within. But there is a cultural change that's coming about.
I'm going to pin you down here, though.
Yeah, go for it. Bring it.
I'm going to pin you.
Go for it.
We kind of tried to do this change and shift in schools, and it didn't work out so well. We got a little too PC, a little too easy on these kids. And now, half these kids are not paying attention in school. They're disrupting other people. I mean, sometimes you need that slap on the wrist with the ruler. Have to really worry about going to the principal. From
the cops or from society?
No, just society in general.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's you're preaching to the choir. So I agree that I don't think law enforcement should always be the first contact for things that are going on. But a lot of this, in my opinion, and I know I'm going to take some blowback for this, but bring it. I've gone to calls where I've seen kids tell their parents to fuck off, or shut your mouth, mom, or you're a bitch.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, that didn't fly in my house growing up. And I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you today if any of that would have came out of my mouth. Like, no joke, let's go back to the comedy side of it. I never swore in front of my mom growing up.
Yeah, neither did I.
And I was doing a show at Comedy Works downtown, and my mom has a very distinct laugh. And all of a sudden, I'd been swearing on stage. I hear her laughing, and I'm like, oh, my God. And I will never forget that. Like, it literally threw me off because I was like, my mom's here and hearing me cuss. Oh, my God. And I was so embarrassed and ashamed because, like, that was not permitted.
Dude, I'm 50.
I know.
And I threw the F-bomb in one of our programs. It was like the second one or something like that. I don't remember. Producer Chad tell you. My mom, 80-something, she called me, she says, you need to not use that language. I don't care if your guests do, but you need not to.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm 50. Wait a minute. But now, you know, and my kid, I don't let my kids get away with it.
No, like, so here's the reality of what's going on. I'll speak to it very plainly. It used to be that when we would contact kids, instead of writing them a ticket, like my favorite thing to do would be to call parents. So they're out in the middle of the night, you know, partying it up, drunk off their ass, you know, whatever it is. And I was like, okay, you know, every kid is going to make a mistake. It's not the end of the world.
Right.
But when they're being smart asses and not being respectful, and you're like, all right, no problem. Let me call mom and dad, wake them up at 2 a.m, come get your ass. And mom and dad would show up and you'd be like, it would be kind of like the cop. I mean, cops, if they're being honest, they'd be like, oh yeah, here we go. And, you know, the parents would get there and they'd start handling out, you know, listen, you get your ass in that car right now. You shut your mouth. Officer, I'm sorry. You know, we'll take care of this. Fine, good enough, right? But now what's happening is parents are showing up. And instead of saying their kids are the ones responsible for the actions that brought us to that situation, they're like, why are you contacting my kid? What is your problem? What do you... And you're like, man, we should have just wrote him the ticket and taken him to detox. You know what I mean? So things are changing, and that's what's scary to me. I hope that one of the things I put out another video that was called "I Will Be of Service," and I don't mean to get deep for just 1 second, but I will say this: I am still committed. Even though I'm frustrated with some of the things that I see a lot of cops who are frustrated. There are still a lot of us, including myself, who this is what we got into. This is what we wanted to do and be part of. And I can't think of any more noble profession than to be in the profession that I'm in. And I'm not going to stop being of service. I used to watch Chips as a kid, Ponch and John. They always had a moral to the story. No matter what's going on around the country, no matter the rioting, the looting, all the things that are going on, you know, even the political issues that are happening right now, put all that aside for 5 minutes and just think about this. There are still people that are having heart attacks every day. There are still people that are abusing kids. There are still predators out there that are preying upon kids and molesting them. There's still people out there, and there's still evil out there in this world, and I don't want to turn my back on that.
God bless
and I
you,
never
man.
will.
That's awesome.
And I want people to know, my point is not to say that cops are better or that cops are, you know, should be, treated, you know, better or higher. No. My whole point is just remember there are a majority of us out there who are still coming and putting on the uniform every single day, saying goodbye to the kids. I don't have kids, but, you know, I have family members too. But they're leaving their kids every day and they're leaving their spouses at home and they're coming and doing the job to the best of their ability.
2 more hardcore questions.
Sure.
One of them personal and the other one not so much. First one is when you put the uniform on now, do you think more about your mortality than you ever did? Chances of you getting in a bad situation are increased? And
No.
I know you're a commander now, but if you're on the street?
No.
Same risk factors?
Same risk factors. I think that I think it'd probably been more tough being a cop back in the days in the 60s during the civil rights, you know, activism times and so forth. I think that much more tough during the Vietnam era. Cops weren't as trained as well as we are today. But at the same time, I worry the opposite. I worry that the young officers are going to be hesitant to take action when they need to and use a level of force that might be overwhelming in order to deal with the situation more quickly, to neutralize it. And that is what worries me, because when you hesitate, we in law enforcement know, which a lot of the public doesn't, a person can act and take a weapon and point it at a cop and shoot way quicker than a cop can actually react to that. That is factual information. So what I don't want is people to be tentative, our deputies to be tentative, and these officers around the country to be tentative when they should have taken an action to protect themselves or somebody else. And because they hesitated because of what they thought maybe the political fallout on the back end, they end up losing lives because of it.
Yep.
That scares the shit out of me.
I lied to you. I have two more then.
Go for it.
So the other one, I watch a show where they take general public people and they put them in a scenario.
Yeah.
Shoot or not shoot.
Right.
Right. And every single time they're all like, oh my God, I didn't get it. Do you think that citizens need some sort of training program to see?
It was amazing. You're like, my ears are burning, or your ears are burning from last night. I was talking to one of my friends saying, I want to bring more people. Like, I've seen them do that with media. Well, they'll have some guy that's not complying, that's a suspicious person. I mean, those suspicious person calls are so difficult a lot of times.
Yeah.
And the person will, I've seen them where they whip out a phone real quick, and the person in the media who's put in the cop role shoots them.
Right.
And then the instructors are like, justify what you did. And they're like,
Right.
And they're like, no, justify it. If you have not been in that situation, in that scenario where you are really your metal is tested, where you're really pushed to the edge of having to make a decision in a split second, you really don't know what you're talking about. And that's the part where it's hard to share that experience.
And when you see that, it's like life-altering experience for those people, like in
Sure.
the media that do it. They're like, oh my God, I had no idea. So why the hell don't we have programs like that?
Well, I think that's a great idea. I would like to see it happen. I think a lot of people, plainly said, I don't know why we don't have that. Maybe that's something. I know there are some agencies do that, but right now, there's a lot of excuses. It comes down to money.
Probably money.
Money,
Yeah,
right?
always.
You got to have people
money.
that come in and train it, teach it.
Yeah.
And we're trying to get our deputies trained up. In the meantime, now this is an added thing.
Yeah,
So
true story.
Yeah.
That's true. Everything comes back to money. All right, another question. What do you think about, and I've heard it said before, but I think it's really fascinating to me, and it's a topic that every time I hear it, I'm thinking, man, you know what? It makes a lot of sense. What if predominantly law enforcement, whatever race you are, works in those race-induced areas? Meaning if you're in a predominantly white area, you have predominantly white cops, predominantly black cops, predominantly Hispanic cops, and then Asian cops, whatever. Do you think that would change anything?
No, I think that I think it doesn't matter what the cop is. I've got friends all over the country that are part of Humanize the Badge. They work in different scenarios. I do think there has to be. I don't think you can have. For example, like in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, I don't think you could have just white officers there. I think that there should be some reflection of that community, because that is the
That's
community.
what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I don't think you can have it like all one way. I think you need to. I think there has to be the multicultural thing.
Yeah.
Because here's the deal, man. Like, we are a multicultural. We're a melting pot in the United States,
Right.
and we've been that way since the days of people coming in through New York. And I think that's what makes us great.
I do too.
Yeah,
But you know
so
what? That's something that gets raised.
It does get raised. I think there has to be some representation of that particular ethnicity or race within a community, because there's going to be ability to relate to that cultural sensitivity, that will be within that group. I think the more multicultural things can be, the better it is, because one of the things I think that, and I'll say this, being Mexican in Boulder, I grew up listening to Mexican music and watching the reaction to my law enforcement officers, even some of my very good friends, when I'm bumping, Conjunto or Norteño or Tex-Mex in my cop car, and watching their faces is like, what is going on? But at the same time, growing up with like Chad, for example, the producer of this show, I listen to country music. People are like, you listen to country music? And I'm like, dude, you have no idea how country I am, and like, I people like you, like Jeff Foxworthy, like, you're a redneck ever.
Just because I'm from Missouri?
Well, I associate being like, I'm part redneck too, because like that's how I grew up, in that culture. I didn't know any different. Like I just grew up, accepting the different things, country music, hip hop, R&B, Tejano, Conjunto. I'm a mix of it all, right? And so sometimes I'll be sitting back and just like, I like to sing, and I'll be like, blame it all on my roots.
Which, by the way, you're a damn good singer too.
Thanks, man.
Did you try that out for a while?
No, I just have enjoyed it. It's like a pastime for me. Like, here's the point about it. You don't know anybody's composition until you sit down and talk to them.
Yeah, true.
And that's the thing, is the cops that are on the line the front day, nobody knows them except for the badge, the nameplate, the gun, the uniform. Take the time to get to know them, man. And when people are just like constantly hammering them, how do you not stay positive? Or how do you stay positive?
It's kind of like with COVID. And I know you're worried about COVID, but here's the deal. You'd think I'd know more people. I mean, I know thousands of people, and I just don't know many people that have it, right?
Right.
And so I kind of look at that same thing with cops. I know that there's probably one or two or three or whatever, but man, I know a lot of them, and they're just not that person that they're being portrayed right now. It's just not.
Right.
And it bothers me, and for them.
Yeah, well, I think there's also like in the world of, the one thing we haven't talked about is in the world of law enforcement, like if you get in trouble, cops will ostracize you immediately. Yeah. Like if you get in an internal affairs investigation, nobody wants to have anything to do with you.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, they did something wrong, and they don't want to be caught up in it. So people around the country will be like, why don't you say something when they're doing this? Why don't you do? There are a lot of cops that are actually saying stuff, and there's a lot of law enforcement organizations where, first and foremost, the culture of the agency wouldn't support that. Like where I work, there is no way you could get away with using excessive force on people without somebody outing you and saying, this isn't going to fly.
Right.
Because that's the culture of it. And not all law enforcement agencies are the same. Like not all football teams perform at the same level. Not all law enforcement agencies ethically or professional-wise perform at the same level. So to categorize all law enforcement agencies or all cops as bastards or all cops are this or all cops are that is a injustice, because it's truly absolutely not true. And I am the first one, like if I saw an officer using force that wasn't appropriate, I would be the first one to intervene there. That you don't need to put a new law in Colorado for that to happen.
I know.
I will not let that happen on my watch, and I'm not going to be silent about it. But I want people to understand that and we don't need pity. And I should not be one-sided. I'm not trying to be. I'm just trying to give this recount of things that are going on. Where I work, there's been a lot of public support for us. People dropping stuff off like donuts, and things like that, where they're trying to be nice but humorous at the same time. And I'm like, son of a bitch, and they bring candy and all this stuff, and they're really trying to be supportive of us, which we really appreciate. But the one thing that I want that I haven't mentioned in this podcast today is this: law enforcement suicide is on the rise. It's huge. And we lose way more cops to their own hand. I could name 6 people off the top of my head right now in my own agency.
I was going to get to that.
And that's the thing that nobody wants to talk about because, one, suicide itself is taboo. People don't like to talk about it.
Yeah.
And, I can see how it's affecting a lot of people. And I've dealt with 3 situations in my short time as a commander in 2 years where I never thought that I would even be dealing with that. And sure enough, there it is right in my face. And if that's happening in an organization that's my size, which we're not small, we're not huge, but we're a really decent-sized agency, man, that must be, I can't imagine what it's like around the country. And cops people don't understand this. They're very private about themselves. It's taken a lot for me to be as open and as forthcoming about my personal stuff as I've been. Like, I would never have told you 10 years ago that I struggle with mental health. Right. I would have kept that private all day long and twice on Sunday. But no more. I have to be vocal about it. If there's a way to save another cop's life by saying what's in my heart, the experiences that I had, that I've struggled with mental health, that I've had that anxiety inside of it, that I can't sleep at night, that I've wondered, what is going to happen to me? Am I really going to be okay? I've dealt with all that, and it's no longer okay for me to be quiet about it. It's okay for me to say, listen, if you're struggling, don't be afraid. Get yourself some help because we want you and we need you. And you can get better from your mental health struggles. You just got to start dealing with them. And not only is that part of our culture in law enforcement, but mental health issues in general across the United States right now are unparalleled from the past.
Absolutely.
And kids right now, they don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with the things. And young people taking their lives is just as bad, if not worse today than it's ever been in the past.
Sure, crazy that you mentioned it. We've already done 2 podcasts on both of those exact things. And, we again, that's something that we want to hit on because we want people to learn something, to get something out of it. I'm glad you brought all that up because I was coming on a little bit down further on the road. But I tell you what, I don't want to leave this without going through a couple things. One of them is I want to know the best thing that anybody's ever told you to get out of a ticket.
The best thing that anybody has ever told me to get out of a ticket. I got asked this a long time ago, and I don't know what I came up with. Here's the thing. I've stopped a guy for doing like well over 100 before, and I walked up to the car, and like usually, people are like, "Officer," and you'll ask them, why I'm stopping you? And like the worst thing to say is like, especially if we stop you for something that clear, I don't know, what are you doing? The first traffic stop I ever made, no joke. So a lot of people like where I work, like they'll say something to me, and I'll be like, "Is that because I'm Latino?" And they're like, "What?" And well, the first traffic stop I ever made in my entire life, I walked up to the car, and the guy was like, I'm like, "Do you know why I'm stopping you?" He's like, "Because I'm Mexican." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "What does it say right here on my badge and or on my nameplate?" And I'm like, "Montez." He's like, "Oh yeah, you're one of those whitewashed Mexicans." I'm like, "Oh my God." So like that kind of that was like right from the get-go for me, which I couldn't believe. But I think that the thing that I look at is truly, it's not a jokey one or a funny one. It's this. I've stopped a guy for doing well over, and he's like, "Look, dude, you stopped me because I was driving like a complete jerk. I was doing 100 and some miles an hour. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have been doing it, and do what you got to do." Well, I don't need to write a ticket. Writing out money to pull out of somebody's pocket isn't going to make an impact. That person had the character to say, "You got me,
Yeah.
Do what you got to do." I don't know if
That's
this is
not my wife, by the way. She gets so pissed. I'm like, "You do realize you're breaking the law, right?"
Well,
Does comedy? I would think you as a comedian, you would find a lot of humor in this.
There's a lot of stuff I want to say, but I can't say it because it's not going to come off on the body camera correctly, and it's not going to be taken in the context that I intended it to be received. So I got to I have to be like, I could be humorous sometimes. So like, I will never forget. I was doing a show at the Dairy Center in Boulder. It's like this performing arts center.
Yeah.
And this lady walks up to me. She's like, "Hi, do you remember me?" I'm like, "No." That's like asking me if I remember a taco I ate 2 years ago. Right. I contact so many people in my career. I don't remember hardly anybody. But she comes up to me. She's like, "Oh my God, I remember you. You had us laughing so hard on the traffic stop." And I'm like, "I pulled you over?" She's like, "Yeah." But then like you started in on me, and my boyfriend couldn't stop laughing because like I was going through the registrations. I guess I had like 10 years of registrations in the glove box. And you're like, "Oh my God." Let's say I stopped her in 2015. She's like 2014 and 2013 and 2012. And I'm like, and so apparently I was giving her a ration of shit because I was like, "Oh my God, do you have the kitchen sink in there?" So I ended up letting her go, but I told her she had to promise me that when she got home that she got rid of the 250 old registrations, insurance cards, and everything else in her car. And but like that one moment where I was joking around and having like a light conversation, that made such a huge impact.
Yeah.
With people, right? And I've pulled over like there's nothing about me that says basketball player, and I've stopped like this last summer. I was driving through one of the areas where I work, and there was these kids that were out there, and they were like from like 10 to probably like 18. They were playing basketball. And so I got out of the car and I was like, "You guys want to see how it's done? You want me to take you to the hole? Do you know what it's like to play Vinnie Montez? I don't know if you know, but my vertical's like 48 inches. And everybody's like, "Oh my God." And the kids were like, "You could jump 48 inches. And all the older kids are like, "He's lying. He's lying." And I'll hang from the rim on you people. And so the next thing you know, I'm playing basketball. I almost like pulled my Achilles tendon out. And all the parents are starting to gather around. But I'm putting myself out there. But what it was doing was showing the human side of what we do. Letting these kids see that it's not just the guy driving by in the uniform. And so to you cops that are out there, one of my favorite buddies who's in Humanizing the Badge, I think he does this better than almost any of us. His name is Ono. His handle is Ono. It's the Popo. Some people call him Dancing Cop, but he's a Columbus, Ohio cop. His name is AJ. And he is constantly out there with the kids and in the neighborhood. They have mock foot pursuits, like where they line up next to each other and see who's faster. He's dancing with them, doing all kinds of cool stuff, and he's a phenomenal guy. And that is what, get out of your cars and go talk with the public, because that car is a barrier between you and them.
Yeah.
They don't know what it's like to be in that. And people, man, cops out there, take a little risk. And those of you who are in the leadership, let me tell you one other thing for those who are listening. If you're in the leadership organization, you're a commander above, a sheriff, a division chief, a chief of police, anybody who runs an organization, you need to not be hating on your officers. And a lot of people probably disagree with me, but I'm telling you right now, speaking from somebody who's been doing this for a while now, it's okay for cops to get out and capture the good things they're doing on their phones and sharing that on social media. Nobody is seeing those things that are going on behind the scenes. Like my sheriff, one of the things that I thought was a tremendous risk for him to take was to let me put that piece out in uniform to the public. But people have to see what really goes on behind the scenes. And like I said, nobody calls the cops for the good things that are going on.
Yeah.
And if we're not showing the things that we're doing behind the scenes, because there's law enforcement agencies who, if a cop takes a picture with a young person or playing basketball and they post it up, or they show them being joking around behind the scenes, they're getting in trouble for it because they're trying to show the humanized side of the law enforcement.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
We can't be so policy worried about every single thing. Now, if it's distasteful or something like that, but you know what? We trust these men and women. We give them a badge, a gun, and we give them the autonomy to go out there and do this job and potentially have to take somebody's life. Let them be able to make a decision for what's humanizing the badge behind the scenes, so that we can get that message out there.
Couldn't agree with you more. And, you know, I of course, I was stalking you because I do that when I do all podcasts, right?
Yeah, I could feel it.
Yeah, I bet you could.
I was getting all kinds of warnings. Like,
so one of the things that I kind of want to leave this with, there was a comment on one of the things on your Facebook, and it was a guy who made a comment, and again, everybody's going to take anything however they want.
Bring it, man. I'm ready for it.
But basically, the comment was that, you know, Vinny, you've got a big platform. And now what you say really matters. And he said, stop doing as many comedy videos and use that platform for what's going on and so on and so forth. Everybody has their, I don't know if you know that reference to one I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think I did see that one.
But, you know, the thing to me is, and it's me opening to my listeners and to potentially your listeners or whatever. You know what, man? I love what you're doing. For me, just my opinion, everybody's got one. Keep the humor in it.
I will. You know, I didn't respond. You know, one of the things that I try not to get involved in is, like, there's a lot of people that are going to troll and hate, and I don't really delete any of those comments. The only ones that I sometimes will delete is if, like, somebody is saying something so vulgar that a young person might see that. That worries me a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, but people have the right to say what they're going to say, and I don't get mad at that person for saying use this platform. But what has allowed me the ability to reach people, to hear some of the things that I'm saying, because I don't, you know, to me, I'm just Vinny.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not here with a political agenda. I'm just talking about real life things that I've experienced and trying to keep perspective of both, you know, share some things that are coming from the law enforcement side, but more importantly, the comedy. And one of the things that I agree with him, I have a platform, but what's allowed me to have that platform is having the comedy side of it, the lighthearted nature to build a bridge to later have a conversation. So today we started off with a little bit of comedy, razzle dazzle, like the joking part, and we've kind of gone into more of a serious discussion, which is what we intended to do. I need to be able to, like I said at the very beginning, we as law enforcement need to be able to break down those barriers and reach people. Well, without the comedy, without the human part of it, the humanity behind it, I won't be able to do that. So that comedy is never going to go away from me. But I do a lot of podcasts. You know, I do a lot of stuff now, more than I ever did before, and that message is getting out there slowly.
I love it, man. I want to thank you, for coming on our show. I mean, absolutely. And I know it's the best podcast you've done, and you don't have to say it out loud. But I want to tell you how much I appreciate you.
Thanks, man.
I appreciate the comedy. Don't ever let the world get too PC where we can't have fun with one another. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, I agree. And I just want to acknowledge one last thing is there's a lot of people who've helped develop who I am today. And I lost my pops right when I never really talk about my dad too much. And I don't know why I want to talk about him today all of a sudden. I lost him right after I became a cop. So I became a cop in 98 and my dad died in January 99. And there were a lot of people who kind of filled in as mentors for me, from even the producer's dad, Chad's dad, and Phil West and Rick Bruffs and all these other people who've been instrumental in my life. Well, one of the things I just want to say is we all have mentors and we all have people that are going to guide us and kick us in the ass when we don't do things right. They're going to be our biggest supporters and cheerleaders for us when we need them to be. But we need those people in our lives to kick us in the ass. And I've got friends too that are like never been affiliated with law enforcement and that I went to college with. And every once in a while I'll get a little too coppish with them. And they're like, "You're doing it again, you son of a bitch. Bring it down a little bit." And so what I want to say is that whoever you are out there, whoever's watching this podcast right now, if those people who spent time, the Chuck Andrews who are in Texas today, the people who've been instrumental in my life, if they would have never taken a chance to invest quality time in me by having conversations, holding me accountable, kicking me in the ass when I needed it, I wouldn't be here today. And my mom is also a huge foundation of my father, right, for where I became who I am today. So what I'm saying to you is there's a lot of people, and I try to do this myself. I'm not just speaking like you should do it. I do this right now. Find those people who you know can have an impact and really mentor them in a good way, because there are people that need mentorship. Nobody can figure this out on their own, and some people just need a little push and a little inspiration to finally get the greatness out of them. So if you are one of those people who are in a position to mentor people, you may not see the final product come in to view while you're mentoring them. It may not be till a decade later, but your instrumental influence at that time, like all the people who see me now, they had no idea what I was going to do, but they didn't care. They just put a boot in my ass when I was a kid, and they cared. And so please, those who are watching this, man, mentorship and helping people and guide them, man, it's one of those things that really means a lot to people.
God, I love the message. You're impactful to the world, not just through being a police officer, but your comedy is going to impact millions. And I appreciate, again, you coming on our show means a lot to us. The best show, baby.
This message does not represent Vinnie Montez Comedy Inc.
I love it. I tell you what, man, I love you. God bless you.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Keep you safe, man. Thanks again a million.
Likewise. You're welcome. Thank you for having me.